Hello everyone and welcome to the Eternal Patch Breakdown. My name is Pojo. I apologize for this one being a day late. We were trying to put it up last night and there was some corruption issues with the videos, so didn't end up coming up. We are going to re-record it and talk a little bit about all of the different patch changes that are coming up. There are some new cards being spoiled for the upcoming set. I think we're going to review them all in a batch when the next couple of them come out. So we will be talking about those separately, but for the moment we're just going to talk about the balance changes that have been put out for Expedition and Throne. As you can see, there's been some pretty significant nerfs, as well as a couple of minor buffs that are pretty interesting. A lot of stuff to bring Expedition into line, and I think a couple of Throne benefits or different ways to like diversify the meta in Throne as well. All right, so let's start with the big one. The Rakano Silix has been nerfed, and all of the other Silixes, of course, as well. Not just Rakano. That would be kind of fun, though. No, so yes, if you have, it used to be that if you had 2 red influence and 2 green influence, or 2 of whatever influence, of course, in the type of your Silix, you would be able to create and draw a treasure trove, and also your Silix would be undepleted. Now it's 3 of each, which means that the Silixes are a lot worse in 3-color decks. They are consistently depleted power, they don't draw you cards nearly as often, which means that they are worth less card advantage, and with the uptick in the cost of tempo, I don't think these cards are particularly playable in most 3-color decks unless you really need the double fixing to make sure that you are getting some like very difficult cards to play. Like if you're running, you know, like 2 colors, 2-color cards or 2 influence requirement cards in each faction somehow, and you just like absolutely need to have fixing, and like the power level of your cards matters more than the fixing itself, then yeah, you can play depleted power here to get sort of the advantages that you need. But overall, this definitely makes it so that Silixes are much more resigned to a dual faction setting. The patch notes on this note that the factions in which the Silixes were particularly popular were generally determining how decks sort of were splashed, and so I do agree that this will diversify the Expedition meta somewhat, because Silixes are a little bit more in line with Paintings. They provide you with basically a lot of advantage in the late game, whereas Paintings provide you with a lot of advantage in the early game, but the Silixes and Paintings are a little bit more on a similar power level now, which is a pretty big deal. So this is a pretty big change, I think, particularly for Throne, but in Expedition it also makes quite a difference because these are, you know, the prime fixers for these factions. I think that 3-color decks are going to be a little more difficult to play with, and basically just you're not going to be fixing with these as often. You're going to be using Felon Vows and Huru stuff, but still the cards are relatively powerful and should be like quite good. This puts them below Crests in terms of power level for me, but I would say that they are still very comparable to Crests in some ways and can be used for similar gains in Throne decks as well. They're just not going to be used nearly as often or be nearly as present in just about every type of deck. So the Silix nerf is definitely a big one. Other cards that have been nerfed, we have a Valkyrie Warp nerf to Heavy Artillery. That card previously created and played a 3/3 rail driver. Now it creates and draws a 3/3 rail driver. This is something where essentially the Valkyrie Warp was just a very powerful effect. If you got it on 4 along with a Valkyrie, then you were typically very set to win the game. I was mostly alright with this swing because killing the Valkyrie early was generally just a really important thing, but it is notable that Heavy Artillery as a 5/1 with Overwhelm and the ability to give your spells Overwhelm is already a pretty powerful card. It deals direct damage to the face, it kills anything that it's up against, typically if it's played on tempo, and the rail driver as a bonus is clearly pretty disgusting. So while the Valkyrie Warp now basically gives you card advantage instead of board advantage and doesn't really like do a lot else for you in terms of like maneuvering the board, I still think that this is a very strong card, and I don't think that the change to it, while the change to it is a really significant change to its swinginess and how many Valkyrie you have to play to make this card good, you're still going to play this card in a lot of red decks that don't have Valkyrie in them, and like in some that have Valkyrie in them as well, because it is a good removal card in red that also has splash damage. It didn't need the extra push, but it was a certainly exciting thing to do to certain decks, particularly like Mandrake decks. This is something that I'm fine with coming down in power level as other decks come down in power level as well. Speaking of which, the Speaking Circle. This is a nerf that I have been certainly requesting quite a bit, and I always have to remember that I don't actually own any copies of this. This was a 4 health unit. It is now a 3 health site. Or a 4 health site, it is now a 3 health site. So we lose 1 health off of it. That makes the Speaking Circle easier to kill with a wide variety of different spells. There are a lot of 3 damage effects that can kill the Speaking Circle now. It gives red, in particular, a lot more tools, but it also means that players who have decent board position can actually punish the Speaking Circle for playing from behind, which is frequently not the case. The Speaking Circle can typically hit a lot of different things that will really mess with you, and then like stuff like Blood Boil Executioner, any charge cards, like small damaging spells. There's a lot of different things that can kill the Speaking Circle now that'll have like a lot better effect as a result of this. This card is, I think, a card that deserves to be nerfed primarily because its play pattern is so slow. The Discover mechanic is really strong, and it's really interesting. I like it at 7, honestly, still, but I think that, like, basically, if this is being played in almost every deck because of its colorless nature and the fact that it actually does stabilize you pretty consistently, like, the Discover mechanic is not always going to give you what you want, but with 9 different choices to find a 3-drop that will actually, like, save the Speaking Circle from dying, this can often get the Queen of Glass pretty unimpeded, which has been an issue in the past. So taking down the durability seems like a nice touch. If it continues to be a problem, I would rather it go up to 7 and the durability could be restored at that point. Not necessarily a thing, but overall, very happy with this change. Speaking Circle was just a little bit too common in too many decks. It's a very fun card, but I think that the payoff for the randomness is just like, it's a little too easy to access, and that's one of the things that you really don't want in good random design. Invasive Creeper has gone from a 2/2 to a 2/1 because, of course, we are nerfing Mandrakes, and Vine Tangler has gone from a 2/4 with a 7-cost ultimate to a 2/4 with a 9-cost ultimate. Yeah, Mandrakes are out of control, and this is definitely a perfectly fine set of changes to the cards. The Creepers need to lose the Mandrakes do need to lose durability in general. I actually would have preferred, like, Vine Tangler be reduced to a 2/3 as well. I think that basically they, as a tribe, have a lot of health and typically get into a situation where they tend to stick to the board really well. Vine Tangler is one of those cards that really sticks to the board and also has like some really good benefits on top of that. The ultimate is just the kicker, so taking that up I don't think is too much of an impact on the board, but it does mean that you aren't going to be able to just win the game with Vine Tangler, which is something that the 7-cost ability really did very commonly. At this point, it's now just a lot more expensive to get into that. Invasive Creeper can now be killed by a wide variety of spells, including Vara's Favor, and just basically is just a little bit harder to deal with. This still doesn't kill like the early regen stuff that Mandrakes have access to, and Mandrakes should be at least somewhat sticky, so I'm okay with this, but it is something that basically allows you to give you a little bit more presence against these types of decks, and with the reduced health on units, I think this is a really big change because red decks in particular, red and purple decks in particular, had a really hard time with Mandrakes. We're gonna have to get some water after this is done. All right, there's just a little bit to wet the whistle. Yeah, so this is something that will effectively allow you to kill the card a little bit more easily, trade with it a little bit better. Both of those things are good because the lifesteal effect on this was shutting out a lot of aggro archetypes in the format, which tends to be a pretty relevant setup. So yeah, reduced power on Mandrakes seems perfectly reasonable. Mandrakes have been very dominant, so good nerf on that end. I would even have seen more done, but we'll see exactly how this puts the cards into line. All right. There are also 3 buffs. One of them is Matriarch Zende, which I don't approve of because it gives the Mandrakes like even more units that are just tough and good to play early. Matriarch Zende as a 2/3 does mean that Matriarch Zende is actually going to see play, be put down, and be able to actually get those sort of bomb transform effects, as well as be able to give Mandrakes flying, so it opens up a new Mandrake archetype. I think that new Mandrake archetypes are fine and good. I don't love that it's being provided through something that has extra health. I would have preferred Matriarch see like maybe some extra attack or something along those lines. In any case, I mean, it is very strange for an Elf Shaman to have a 3/2 stat line, so yeah, I'm not really sure what I would have said would be like the best change here, but yeah, Matriarch Zende is just like a little buff to Mandrakes, which seems a little bit strange considering that they're trying to bring Mandrakes back into line, but it is an underplayed legendary, so I sort of understand that. It's still a little bit strange. Skimmer Wrangler is getting a buff. It now stuns 2 enemy units with flying. Those still stay stunned whether you have Skimmer Wrangler. This is a good answer to Matriarch Zende's Flying Mandrakes, which is kind of nice. The card has been buffed twice now. I think it was a 3-3 previously, and now it's a 4-3. 4-3 with Overwhelm, Explorer, Soldier. Already a really good stat line. The summon ability was pretty irrelevant, but now it is something that can just shut down aerial units. Dichro Vindicated, a lot of cards that, well, it can't actually shut down Dichro Vindicated because Dichro has Endurance, but it can shut down a lot of other like very scary Valkyrie and other types of setups, and it seems like a really solid soldier play. The primary reason why people didn't play Skimmer Wrangler previously was because there was too much competition for the slot. I think that's still true, but Skimmer Wrangler as a 4-3 Overwhelm with a really relevant ability probably sees some play now. Like, it seems like a strong enough card. Finally, Opum's Technique now deals damage to multi-faction or factionless enemies, meaning that it can now hit, of course, the Speaking Circle, which is really, really nice. It can also hit Prism Golem and a wide variety of other colorless units, which I think is pretty relevant if you want to do some extra damage to other things. I don't think that your opponent qualifies as a factionless enemy, but that would be really funny. In general, this is just any sort of unit or any sort of site, and you can deal damage to either with Opum's Technique now, which gives the card a lot more versatility. I think the primary problem that these charms have been having in the Expedition formats is that those formats are pretty fiercely tribal, and while these cards do provide units of the tribe, it can frequently be the case that you don't really get to use the Create and Draw Random ability quite as much, and oftentimes, like in the tribal sets, you just want a lot of cards in your tribe for drawing and playing purposes. So like Opum's Technique can be like or all of the techniques can be a little bit slower for setting these types of things down. I think they all see reasonable amounts of play, so it's not a big problem that these cards have not like seen as much play as I would have expected, but I have definitely noticed myself passing these cards up due to the desire to get some more like Sentinel draws in the deck, or like actively affect cards in play or in the hand with cards that benefit like Sentinels, that kind of thing. In any case, this is definitely a pretty strong card. It has a lot of like useful things going on. The cards I'm specifically referring to are things like the 1 cost that specifically looks for Sentinels. That particular card draw engine really wants you to have Sentinel cards. What is the name of that card? We'll find it real quick. Amaran Shoveler. Cards like these, where you are specifically looking for Sentinels or Relics in your deck, mean that you want to have like a high number of Sentinels and Relics in your deck, which means that cards like Technique, which do benefit Sentinels in other ways, or at least benefit from Sentinel bonuses, don't benefit from these cards. And so like continuing to increase the strength of that card gives it a higher chance of being played in Sentinel Tribal, which I think is a good change. Finally, there have been some fixes. The Speaking Circle can now play some displays that it wasn't able to display before. That's a bug fix. And then call on allies, align the Tesseract, and clear the way. The cards with the Amplify abilities call on allies that exhaust to play abilities. These weren't triggering any sort of cards that count amplifications. This was a problem that I was definitely having a lot with Soldier Amplify, and this does make the card quite a bit better in Soldier decks in particular. So I think this is a very good change, and obviously just a really needed bug fix. Okay, that's it for the patch breakdown for today. So as far as things go, like to summarize as we will, I would say that there have definitely been some good changes to improve the sort of the number of different decks being played in Expedition. In particular, Silix's being changed means that it opens up a lot of different color combinations and opens up like a lot of different other like decks to have higher power levels without losing out on that sweet card advantage. So I think that'll really open up a lot of decks that might not have been as open before. You can try a lot of things that will actually work better because other people won't have those Silix's to rely on to sort of push themselves over the edge in win rate against your types of decks. I also think that like the diversity additions are good. It's always nice to see the Mandrakes nerfed. I still don't think the Mandrakes nerfs are going to be enough, but after like 4 nerfs, I could certainly be wrong at this point. And Sentinel bonuses and Valkyrie bonuses are all pretty nice. I think that it seems like a pretty good set of changes. Oh, no Valkyrie bonuses. There was just a heavy artillery nerf, which is totally fine in my eyes. So yeah, it seems like there's going to be some extra diversity in Expedition. I don't know if this will affect Throne that much, except for a reduction in the use of Silixes, which still allows crests to be used, so isn't too much of an issue, but we might see a few more dual faction decks as a result to better take advantage of those Silixes and get those kinds of benefits. Apart from that, a slightly more diverse meta is pretty interesting, and coming on the heels, or on the, not on the heels, but coming right before Buried Memories and the new cards, which we'll be talking about very, very soon, we're going to be seeing some pretty cool stuff. Pre-orders for Buried Memories open on Thursday. I'm sure there will be more spoilers at that time, and we should be doing a review for them either Wednesday or Thursday and putting that up as well. So stay tuned for that and subscribe if you are interested in more content. Beyond that, I'm on Twitch and Twitter and Patreon, and you can find me in all of those places. I stream at 7 p.m. PST, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I hope you all enjoyed. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.